Do you see this? This is what a trucker brought home after busting his butt for a week. Over $8,000 gross. And at the end of the day, after all of these deductions, he netted $47.15. If that ain't proof this industry is predatory, I don't know what is, man. Tolls, insurance, escrow, ERP plates, IFTA tax, fuel, maintenance, truck lease, trailer rental, compliance fee, ELD service, admin processing fee. This guy made $8,700 gross for 1 week and netted $47. Come on, man. We're just gonna let this bad boy burn. They can keep this settlement. And all of the corruption and manipulation they are doing to this industry, they are squeezing us out. For what? Automation? What do they want? Robots to take our place and drive the freight around America? We'll see how good that works out for them. If you drive a truck for a living, you probably don't need anyone to tell you how rough the job can be. But for those on the outside, listen up. The American trucking industry has become downright predatory toward its drivers. How else do you explain a system where truckers can wait half a day or more without pay just to pick up a load, often with no restroom in sight, all while big logistic companies reap the profits? Or where port truck drivers hauling essential cargo take home a median annual income of just $28,000 once expenses are deducted, just like that settlement I just showed you. It's effectively poverty wages for full-time, highly demanding work. It's tragically ironic. Trucking has never been more in demand, yet for many drivers, the job has never been this bad. The US supply chain is utterly dependent on trucks. They move over 70% of domestic freight by weight, but the people behind the wheel often bear all the risk and cost for scant reward. In this report, we'll prove how the industry's very structure has become exploitative, showing specific evidence of predatory practices, and explain how it got to this point. From the glory days of regulated, unionized trucking that once provided a solid middle-class living, through the deregulation wave that flooded the market with cutthroat competition, to the present-day reality of misclassified independent drivers and 90% turnover rates. We'll cover it all, and we'll look ahead at what's next, including whether the looming automation revolution will alleviate these problems or worsen them. So buckle up. Safety first after all, right, drivers? Not every trucking job is terrible. In fact, a few are downright good. Consider Walmart's private trucking fleet, often touted as one of the best gigs in the industry. Walmart employs around 14,000 drivers in its own fleet, and drivers can make up to 6 figures a year. In early 2022, Walmart announced it was raising starting pay for new drivers to as high as $110,000 in the first year. That's roughly double the national median pay for truckers, truly an elite wage. These company drivers also get perks almost unheard of elsewhere in trucking: guaranteed home time and full benefits, paid days off. No wonder Walmart's fleet has unusually high driver loyalty. One veteran Walmart driver said he plans to stay until retirement because, barring a lottery win, there's nowhere better to go. What does a day in the life of a top-tier trucker look like? At Walmart, a regional driver's day might start before dawn at a distribution center, picking up a preloaded trailer full of goods. They'll earn per mile pay. Let's say around 55 cents a mile for an experienced driver is what they usually get. Plus additional pay for every stop, every drop and hook, and even delays. For example, a Walmart driver might haul 400 miles in a day, earning maybe $220 for mileage, make 2 or 3 store deliveries, earning extra about $12 to $15 per stop. He'll swap trailers, a few bucks more, and if they get stuck waiting beyond a cutoff, 45 minutes, etc., Walmart will pay an hourly delay rate, around $14 an hour for the downtime. Added up, and it's common to gross $400 in a day for roughly 11 hours on duty. Not bad, right? Indeed, Walmart publicly advertises average pay in the about 100K range for its drivers, and many confirm six-figure earnings on trucking forums. The job also has a human schedule, often 5 days on and 2 days off, meaning drivers sleep in their own bed weekly, a luxury in long-haul trucking. You rarely see your bed in trucking. But if this sounds too good to be true, remember that it is the exception. Walmart's trucking jobs are considered cream of the crop, and they're extremely hard to get. The company can afford to be picky. Applicants are expected to have years of experience with spotless driving records, pass rigorous background checks and physicals, and even go through Walmart's own training regimen. In short, Walmart hires the best of the best. And even many seasoned drivers won't make the cut. Other coveted trucking jobs have similar barriers. Parcel delivery giant UPS, for example, pays its unionized drivers very well. A UPS long-haul driver or feeder driver can also earn around six figures with excellent benefits. But UPS mostly promotes from within, and jobs are competitive to secure. The union presence at such companies, UPS, Teamsters, helps guarantee pay and working conditions far above the industry norm. Similarly, niche sectors like some LTL freight companies, less than truckload, or private fleets for large manufacturers may offer good wages and home time. Yet these represent a tiny slice of the 3.5 million truck drivers on American roads. The vast majority of truckers today do not enjoy anything close to Walmart or UPS level treatment. In fact, by today's standards, a job like Walmart's decent pay, some paid downtime, predictable schedule is considered good when it used to be normal. To understand how most trucking jobs got so bad, we have to look at how the industry used to work and what changed. There was a time when truck driving was a solid middle-class career. Let's rewind several decades. In the mid-20th century, the 1940s to the 1970s, long-haul trucking in America was heavily regulated by the federal government, the Interstate Commerce Commission, the ICC, through the Motor Carrier Act of 1935, tightly controlled who could operate on interstate routes, what freight they could carry, and what rates they could charge. This created a stable, almost cartel-like market. It spurred largely by the big railroads fearing competition. The government essentially capped the number of authorized carriers and kept rates high enough to ensure carriers could turn a profit and pay good wages. Under this regulated regime, trucking companies weren't under pressure to cut wages or underbid each other. Rates were often standardized flat across the line by regional rate bureaus, and new carriers found it nearly impossible to get authority unless they proved an unmet need. Existing carriers, like the early version of UPS, were grandfathered in and protected from new competition. For drivers, this meant many worked for large, stable companies on regular routes. Crucially, strong unions, especially the Teamsters, bargained for high pay and benefits across much of the industry. By the 1970s, over half of all the truckers were unionized. And virtually all the big interstate freight companies had to honor the Teamsters Master Freight Agreement, a national contract ensuring standardized, generous pay and pensions. The result? Trucking was a pretty dang good blue-collar job. Drivers could support a family, had decent hours and overtime, and retired with a pension. They were good to go. Yes, this old system had its downsides. Shipping goods by truck was more expensive for consumers. By some estimates, regulation kept freight rates 30 to 50% higher than they would be in a free market, which is what we're in now. It also created odd inefficiencies. Carriers were stuck in rigid rules about what they could haul and where. For instance, a farmer with an authority to only haul produce from Florida to Ohio could not carry anything on the return trip if it wasn't produce, leading to empty backhauls and wasted capacity. The protected carriers grew fat and happy, sometimes inefficient. By the late 1970s, pressure was mounting to bring prices down and improve productivity in transportation, part of a broader wave of deregulation, which hit airlines and railroads too. In 1980, the hammer fell. President Jimmy Carter signed the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, effectively deregulating the trucking industry. This law eliminated most ICC entry controls and price fixing in trucking. All of a sudden, anyone could start a trucking company and compete for routes and freight. Carriers were free to negotiate rates or slash prices to win business. It was hailed as a win for free enterprise and consumers, and indeed, shipping costs did drop significantly in the years after 1980. But the flip side was a seismic upheaval in the labor market for drivers. Deregulation ushered in a truckload of new competition. Quite literally, the number of trucking companies exploded, going from under 20,000 before 1980 to well over 500,000 by 2000. Many of these new authorities were just one truck owner-operators, but collectively it was a flood. Workers flocked to become truckers as well. In 1977, there were about 1.1 million truck drivers in America. By 1996, there were around 1.9 million, nearly double. With so many new companies and drivers scrambling for loads, the industry became a classic buyer's market. Shippers had endless options, so they could demand lower rates to survive. Trucking firms, both new startups and the old guard, had to slash costs, and the easiest cost to cut was labor. Over the 1980s and 1990s, truckers' wages plummeted. In real terms, by one analysis, drivers in 1998 were earning 30 to 40% less, adjusted for inflation, than drivers in 1980, before deregulation. Essentially, a middle-class job got knocked down to a working poor job for many. Benefits and working conditions eroded as well. Union power diminished rapidly. Many unionized carriers went bankrupt in the early 1980 price wars, and non-union operators gained market share by hiring drivers at lower pay with no pension. The Teamsters National Freight Agreement crumbled as companies pulled out or folded. Today, outside of a few strongholds like UPS, Walmart, and some niche freight companies, most truck drivers have no union representation and correspondingly lower bargaining power. It's hard to overstate the cultural shift in trucking. The industry went from a relatively stable, homogeneous set of carriers with long-term drivers to a fragmented free-for-all by 1990. There were tens of thousands of new trucking outfits, and by 2024, over 500,000 registered motor carriers. Many are tiny outfits or independent contractors. While competition made trucking more efficient and affordable from an economic standpoint, consumers benefited from cheaper goods delivery. The human cost was steep. Turnover skyrocketed as big trucking companies churned through drivers to keep wages low. In fact, long-haul trucking today suffers an annual driver turnover rate around 90% at large carriers. Imagine an employer where almost everyone quits or is replaced within a year. That's trucking in a nutshell. It's a strong indicator that something is fundamentally wrong on the job satisfaction and sustainability front. One way companies adapted was by shifting risk onto drivers. Taking a page from the gig economy, many trucking firms avoided hiring drivers as full employees at all. Instead, they embraced the use of owner-operators and independent contractors. Why pay a salary with benefits and cover truck costs, fuel maintenance, all that other stuff, when you can have the drivers pay for that themselves? Thus began the rise of the misclassified trucker in the post-deregulation era. Today, about 3.5 million Americans work as truck drivers, and roughly half of them are classified as self-employed owner-operators, rather than W-2 employees on paper. An owner-operator is a trucker who owns their own truck in business, contracting their hauling services to shippers or brokerages. It's the romantic cowboy image of trucking. Be your own boss. Pick your loads. Keep the profits. In reality, though, a huge portion of these so-called independents are not truly independent. Only about 44% of owner-operators drive under their own direct authority, meaning they find their own loads and operate like a small business. The other 45%, nearly 750,000 drivers, are leased to motor carriers. These folks often drive trucks branded by a big company, carry that company's loads exclusively, and follow that company's rules, sounding an awful lot like employees in practice. However, because they are formally contractors, the carrier doesn't pay payroll taxes, doesn't provide benefits, and can dodge liability for things like overtime or injury. This gray area has been ruthlessly exploited by many firms to cut costs at drivers' expense. Take the example of XPO Logistics, a large freight and brokerage company. XPO's port trucking operations in California relied heavily on an asset-light model. They use independent contractors for short-haul trips, moving shipping containers. XPO doesn't have to buy the trucks or pay for fuel. The drivers handle all that. In fact, investigations showed many of these drivers were leasing their trucks through XPO itself, sometimes via predatory lease-to-own schemes. Drivers had to foot the bill for diesel, maintenance, insurance, and often wait unpaid for hours at port terminals to get a container. Under this model, XPO avoided paying minimum wage or overtime by claiming drivers weren't employees. The result for workers like Omar Alvarez, a port trucker at Los Angeles Long Beach, was dire. After all his expenses, the median take-home pay for port drivers was only $28,000 a year, per a 2019 UC Berkeley study. That's for full-time, often 60-plus hours of a work week. Alvarez noted he had no health insurance, and as an immigrant not eligible for Medicaid, he'd actually drive to Tijuana, Mexico for medical care because he couldn't afford US doctors on his income. If that isn't proof of a predatory system, what is? Some companies have faced legal consequences for this misclassification of drivers as contractors. There have been dozens of lawsuits by port truckers and others, many of which found that drivers were in fact functioning as employees and were owed back pay. XPO alone recently paid a $30 million settlement to misclassified drivers, but notably, even after paying fines, companies often continue the same practices. It's simply cheaper to pay an occasional lawsuit than to fundamentally change the business model. That says a lot. Exploiting drivers is so profitable that it's viewed as just a cost of doing business. This misclassification issue is especially egregious in certain segments. We saw it at the ports of LA Long Beach, where by one estimate, only about 20% of drivers were truly independent, and the rest were basically employees on paper-thin disguises. Another hotbed is the drayage and last-mile delivery sector. Think of the drivers who shuttle trailers short distances from rail yards or deliver for big retailers. Many are contractors who get paid per load with no hourly wage, absorbing traffic delays and traffic costs on their own dime. Even among company drivers, actual employees, the industry finds ways to underpay and overwork. A common practice is pay by mile only. That encourages drivers to cover as many miles as possible, but it also means any time not driving is unpaid. Got stuck in a 3-hour shipper loading dock queue? Tough luck. That's free labor. Sitting in a traffic jam due to an accident? Unpaid. Need to do a safety inspection? Fill out paperwork? Fuel up the truck? Unpaid. Studies show truckers spend a huge chunk of their working hours waiting or doing non-driving tasks. On average, drivers only drive about 6.5 hours of their 11 available hours per day, with the rest lost to delays and breaks. One MIT analysis found drivers spend around 2 hours at each pickup and drop-off on average just waiting to unload and load. Much of this time is uncompensated under mileage pay schemes. The American Transportation Research Institute, ATRI, found that truckers are detained or delayed for detention 117 to 209 hours per year on average, depending on the sector. That's 15 to 26 8-hour days of sitting around for no pay each year. This effectively lowers a driver's true hourly wage substantially. In economic terms, trucking companies have managed to externalize a lot of their inefficiencies onto the back of drivers. It's no wonder then that turnover is sky high and many would-be career truckers flee the industry. As one trucking journalist put it bluntly, drivers leave the industry for jobs with better pay and hours. The industry likes to cry driver shortage, but evidence shows it's largely a self-inflicted sabotage of decent jobs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics and other researchers have disputed the idea of a chronic driver shortage. There are plenty of people with CDLs. The issue is retaining them. When 90 out of 100 new drivers quit within a year at mega carriers, the problem is not lack of drivers. It's the conditions pushing them away. Low pay, exhausting weeks away from home, and poor treatment are the real culprits. Real quick, My old headset kept dropping calls and the noise cancellation was trash. I finally tried the Blue Tiger Storm. I started with this black one. I liked it so much that I reached out to them and partnered with them. Then they dropped the gold edition and I had to grab it. Bam! It's the same one as the black version, but it's gold. So I'm gonna be rocking like a Saudi prince, only but a trucker. There it is. Ooh. These things are dope, man. They work so good. They're super clear. They stay connected while you're on the road. It blocks the engine and road noise because if you're a trucker, you already know how it gets super loud. And a lot of the times you can't even hear people, like your family or dispatch. And the design is just slick. It works with Hey Siri. Everything is just integrated. I haven't found a better headset and they're not too expensive. So if you want one, I set up a 10% off anything with code GUYINATruck. The link and the code is in the description of this video. Make sure you use the code GUYINATruck at checkout because it won't auto-populate. And I want you guys to get that 10% off. So go get you one of these gold editions or the black and use code GUYINATruck for that 10% off. Let's shine a light on two particularly predatory corners of trucking: port drayage and oilfield trucking. We touched on this with the example of California port drivers. These truckers often lease their trucks through the company, a setup that can become modern indentured servitude. A 2017 investigation famously found some port drivers were taken home as little as 67 cents after a full week of work, once truck lease payments and fees were deducted. While that was an extreme case, it highlighted how the lease contracts were designed so that drivers might never actually own the truck, but keep paying high weekly rentals. Furthermore, the ports of LA, Long Beach became notorious for long waits during the 2020 and 2021 import surge. Trucks would line up for 4 to 6, even 8 hours to get a container. If a driver waits 6 hours, by then, federal hours of service rules, which cap driving hours, might prevent them from making the delivery that day, meaning they wasted a full day and earned nothing. Meanwhile, the company doesn't care. They'll just dispatch another driver next shift. It's a highly imbalanced system, and many port truckers simply quit during the pandemic crunch. In late 2021, an estimated 30% of port drivers stopped showing up on weekdays, and 50% stopped taking weekend shifts because it just wasn't worth it. Think about that. At the height of an import backlog, a third of the drivers walked away, despite there being plenty of cargo needing to be hauled. That's a damning indictment of the job quality. Oilfield frac sand trucking. In West Texas's Permian Basin, America's busiest oil field, trucking takes on a boom and bust fervor. Companies entice drivers with eye-popping pay to haul frac sand, the sand used in drilling operations. You might see ads claiming $25,000 a month or $9,000 a week for owner-operators to haul sand in the oil field. Sounds incredible, right? But these numbers are only achievable in the most ideal non-stop work scenarios. And reality is far from ideal. In mid-2024, frac sand haulers in the Permian had enough and started protesting. They would show up at the sand mines and block the entrances with their trucks and cars, distributing flyers about their cause. What were they so upset about if the pay was supposedly great? Essentially, they were not getting paid for most of their time. Drivers reported sitting 2 to 24 hours waiting to load sand at mines or unload at well sites without pay. One driver said it's routine to wait up to 18 hours in line for a single load. And unlike some freight companies that might start paying detention after 2 hours, many of these oil field gigs paid zero for wait time. On top of that, the remote sites often lack basic facilities like bathrooms, forcing drivers, men and women alike, to resort to buckets or bushes while on a 12-hour wait. It doesn't matter if you dangled $1,200 a day as a theoretical earning. If you cannot actually turn enough loads due to bottlenecks, you won't see that money. The variable, chaotic nature of oil field logistics means a lot of wasted time and fuel for drivers. But from the perspective of the sand mine operators and oil companies, a line of trucks waiting is fine. It means their demand is being met. And if one driver quits, another will take that slot. The protesters in Texas, a grassroots group called Truckers Movement for Justice, were demanding things like pay by the hour, or load guarantees, and installation of restrooms at sites. Their slogan might as well be "Justice for Truckers." as seen on signs, a fight against a clearly predatory setup. These examples underscore a common theme. Companies leveraging on oversupply of drivers and lack of labor protections to extract maximum work for minimum pay. It's a systemic issue that spans from ports to oil fields and everywhere in between. Whenever a segment of trucking can get away with calling drivers independent contractors, it likely will, because it shifts cost and responsibility off the company's books. And even among employee drivers, the norm in long haul is not to pay for a significant portion of the work, all the hours spent doing things other than driving. Real quick before we continue the video, the rest of this stuff is super important, and I realize that you're still with me, so hang on 1 second. Let's get the awareness out there. And one of the ways is not only through this video, we let the public know like what's really going on in the trucking industry in case they don't know, but also I just created a new store. You can check the link in the description and get this very shirt on there. It says no driver shortage, a shortage of respect. And then this hat says make trucking great again. Just a few things like that on my store that you can get and help support this channel and also support the greater cause of truck drivers. All right, let's get back into the video real quick. If you read the news or listen to industry lobbyists, you'll often hear we have a truck driver shortage, tens of thousands short, with the number supposedly growing as demand rises and older drivers retire. But many experts say it's not a shortage of qualified drivers. It's that too few are willing to work under current pay and conditions. Raise wages and improve schedules, and the shortage disappears. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics points out that in a true shortage, wages rise to attract talent. Yet trucking wages adjusted for inflation have stayed flat for decades. The shortage narrative helps big trade groups push for looser safety rules, younger CDL age limits, or autonomous truck development. Turnover is often 90%, meaning the real problem is retention. Walmart proved that paying good works, hiring 5,000 plus drivers in a few years by offering top wages. The average long-haul trucker makes about $53,000 a year for about 60 to 70 hours a week. Compare that to UPS delivery drivers making about $95,000 with benefits and no shortage of applicants. The blueprint is clear. Pay more, treat drivers better. I know it's hard to do, right? And people will line up to the door. Many carriers say competition and low shipper rates keep them from raising pay, fueling a race to the bottom. That began with deregulation. Another growing frustration is constant monitoring. ELDs track hours, GPS shows exact locations, and driver-facing cameras watch your every move. Scorecards log hard braking, idling, fuel use, and route adherence. Companies call it safety and efficiency. Many drivers see it as overbearing control. Outward-facing dash cams can protect against false claims, but inward-facing ones feel invasive when your truck is also your home, man. For some, it's enough to leave the industry. Automation is on the horizon now, and it's entering the mix. In late 2024, Kodiak Robotics ran fully driverless trucks in Texas oil fields. By April 2025, Aurora Innovation launched driverless semis on I-45 between Dallas and Houston with no one in the cab, partnering with FedEx and Uber Freight and planning expansion. Automation could cut costs, run trucks nearly non-stop, and potentially improve safety, but it also threatens long-haul jobs, the segment most likely to be automated first. Optimists say robots could take the worst runs and leave humans better local jobs. Pessimists fear companies will invest even less in human drivers and accelerate job losses. In the short term, drivers may face more pressure, tighter schedules, and the least desirable routes. Public awareness plays a role. Part of what allowed conditions to degrade was that drivers became invisible. The public enjoys 2-day shipping and stock shelves, rarely thinking about the human cost to the truckers on the road. But during the pandemic, people started to realize how essential truck drivers really are. There's an opportunity to build on that awareness, to make it unacceptable for our economy to rest on exploited truck driver labor. Much like scrutiny on Amazon's warehouse led to public pressure, a spotlight on trucking can urge reform. In conclusion, the trucking industry's predatory treatment of drivers is not natural. It's the result of choices in deregulation, in corporate practices. Those choices can be changed. Truck driving can once again be a respected, stable, middle-class career. The skeleton of that world still exists in places like Walmart's fleet or UPS. Reversing the damage will take new laws, stronger labor organizing, and adapting to technology in a way that puts human drivers first. One thing's for sure, trucking keeps America moving, and the people behind the wheel deserve better than the predatory status quo. We've shown the proof. Now it's up to the industry leaders and policymakers to fix it before the next generation of truck drivers is gone for good.